a change, we're actually doing like a fun episode where we're not yelling or
Yeah,
screaming about something.
yeah.
Although I have some yelling to do at the end, but
Okay.
we can save that.
No, I was
But
just
this is going to
thinking
be like a
about,
pleasant episode.
yeah, I was just thinking about what a nice change of pace this episode is, because it's not about it's not about imperialism in any way. It's
Yeah.
not about the great state in the US. It's not about
Uh,
China. It's not about the Middle East. It's not about anything like really like overly intellectual. It's about what is it about? It's about like these like rural cooking videos that are really popular on social media now, which you've been into these for a really long time.
Not I would not. I mean, I've been to it for like several years, but really, I'm very provincial in my taste. Is that I only watch really only one, which is the biggest one, albeit she's like very famous, Li Ziqi,
Li
if I'm
Shiji.
saying it right.
Hmm.
She's this amazing woman. She's like I can't even describe her, but there's a lot written about her, and we will talk about that a little bit. I've been watching her for a long time, but you are the one who kind of we did this through obviously cell phone over the course of COVID too. I remember
Hmm.
you would send me a lot of the ones you would find,
Hmm.
and I feel like you're obviously the expert here in this domain because you don't even watch that much Li Chi. I think you're more
I
into
don't.
these. You're more
Yeah.
into the Douyin and the TikTok people, and I mean I know a few of the people on the Chinese kind of rural YouTubers, not
Hmm.
YouTubers, sorry, the TikTokers. I think he's another famous one. He goes under High Trend. He's like a famous one.
I don't think I
Um,
know that one.
he's got a bunch like his account kind of changes every now and then, but that's the one I remember. I can include it here, but
Yeah.
um,
Well, we should put like a video of Li Ziqi in the beginning, and then yeah,
yes,
as sort of an
we could
introduction.
play it now. She's amazing. She's like this, her story is amazing too.
Hmm.
Um, she has this kind of Cinderella story where she was kind of living. She was born in the countryside and then left to the city. She sort of followed a very kind of modern Chinese route that a
Hmm.
lot of Chinese people kind of walked, which was leave their somewhat dilapidated villages in the countryside to go and seek opportunities in cities. I mean, this is not just the Chinese story too. This is like a global story.
Hmm.
This is like one of the global stories of modernity, right? The sort of
Hmm.
the trek from the country to the city. But she eventually moved back. I mean, I've one version of her story, which I've heard, is that she had kind of troubles with her step siblings. She kind of lived
She
with a
had
dad, like
trouble with her
stepmom,
stepmom, I think. Her
stepmom.
stepmom
Yeah,
abused her. Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah.
And she kind of fled back to her village
Hmm.
with her grandmother and grandfather and began living, the sort of traditional rural life that her family presumably had lived for centuries before that, right? And so it's a pretty simple story. It's like something out of a novel that you would read, but it's also a very human. I mean, there's a reason why it's out of a novel because it's like a realist story. Like it's a story that a ton of people have, which is kind of return to your roots. And she
Mm.
eventually started this YouTubing, this sort of vlogging it was called back then. People don't talk about vlogging anymore, at
Oh,
least
do you
of her.
pronounce it vlogging or vlogging? I always thought it's
Vlogging, I guess.
vlogging.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, maybe vlogging. The kind of word disappeared because they got subsumed into I feel like, I mean, this is a different story, different conversation, but a lot of these people who kind of did their lives in this way, however you want to call it, kind of
Hmm.
videoed their lives. They got sort of framed or sort of sucked into like whatever social media app
Hmm.
that they use, so they became TikTokers or they became
Yeah.
YouTubers. Or so it's also a weird story of like the 2000s and 2010 specifically is the rise. At least it's interesting to me as an outsider. Obviously I don't speak Chinese,
Hmm.
so I have only partial. And actually it's an interesting, I think that's part of what's interesting is that a lot of these people cater to a non-Chinese audience, which I
Mm.
actually think Li Ziqi doesn't. Li Ziqi doesn't cater. No, sorry. A lot of people don't cater to a non-Chinese audience, but their ability to become global stars and like global phenomenon, there is a kind of translatability of what these people are doing
Hmm.
in these activities. That like food is a universal value. That like something that Li Ziqi did is like she made like a silk like bedspread.
Hmm.
Like that's like something that people can recognize, and like even with like a little bit of translation in terms of like the steps involved of like what's happening in this scene, like that video is amazing. Like I'll clip it in here as I talk about it.
Okay.
But stuff like that is interesting, is that the translation, the language barrier doesn't really mean very much. Is that it the Chinese, I think Chinese is a pretty severe language barrier,
Hmm.
insofar as
Yeah, she
just like
doesn't ever
English
really
speak.
talk in any of her
No,
videos. Yeah. But I mean, you
just
understand what's
snippets of
going on
conversation.
because you
Yeah.
see what she's doing. Yeah.
You do get, she does show have dialogue with the people around her, so it's not like a silent thing. Like she does interact with the people, which they never subtitle. Which is like, so she just goes about her life. And so we can get into her story too, because there's an interesting been a backlash against her too in like the early 2000 to 2020.
Hmm.
People started hearing about her more outside of China. I think her global brand, and this of course brought on these like the loser gusanos who are paid to like write stupid articles. And we could talk
Yeah.
about those later. I'm going to clip those in, but that's basically the extent of my knowledge. I mean, I know a few other ones here and there.
Hmm.
So that's been my general impression. Has been mostly through her. I mean, I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time watching her and recommending her to people, and like I always put her on and stuff for my family and
Yeah.
friends and stuff.
Yeah,
But yeah,
so this is what I know about her. She like came from a village, right? And she moved to the city. So this is like a story that's really common among Li Ziqi and also like these other Chinese TikTok and YouTube rural food content creators. So there's like Li Ziqi, and I don't know if you've heard of her, but there's also I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly. Danshi Shogi,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. She's another. Yeah, I've seen her videos. A few,
Yeah. So
not as
there's
many.
like one video I want to show of hers, like after we talk about Li Ziqi. But Li Ziqi, she moved to they both moved to the city and then returned back to the countryside. But Li Ziqi she was a waitress in the city and she was a
All right.
DJ.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
she moved back to the countryside after her grandpa died to take care of her grandma. And she started to create this kind of rural food content to promote her specialty products that she would sell on this Chinese platform that's like kind of like a cross between Amazon and Etsy. And she'd sell these products. She'd create this content to promote these products to sell to support her sick grandmother. And now she's like basically like a huge brand name in China, and her videos are used to promote her brand and these kinds of specialty products. And like if you go to China to any store, you'll see like her stuff like everywhere. So her brand is used to sell like instant noodles, instant drinks, any kind of like shelf stable instant product. And in 2020 alone, she made over $300 million in
Wow.
US dollars in sales. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mashallah.
But but
It's great.
if you go to her YouTube, if you go to her TikTok, you'll notice that she hasn't put out content since like November or December. And it's
Yeah.
because she's having a dispute right now with her I guess it's like a management company,
Like her marketing. Yeah. Marketing.
her
Yeah. Something like
multi-channel
that. Management.
network.
Yeah.
So like if you're an influencer, you're basically in charge of your content, right? But then you hire what's called a multi-channel network, which handles the commercial aspect, and they handle like the monetization strategy, they handle your brand, while the influencer, you're in charge of your creative content. And so the MCN agencies, they would provide services like assisting the content creators with refining content, editing videos, negotiating collaborations with brands. And so she had like some sort of dispute. She's having some sort of dispute with her MCN right now, which is why, she hasn't put out content in like 6 or 7 months. But it's really interesting, like this whole phenomenon of this like interest in these Chinese rural cooking videos, because I feel like people in the States really started they started becoming popular here in the States during um the COVID pandemic, like in 2020. Because people started like hanging out on TikTok a lot more. But also, I feel like
Cottage core. I think
cottagecore,
it's
yeah,
called.
became
Yeah.
really popular because, like, I think they're really popular in among like Chinese urban dwellers in China, as well as like probably like urban dwellers here, because this kind of rural content presents like this really like idyllic country lifestyle, and it kind of presents like an escape from this fast-paced lifestyle of like the monotony of like going to work and like coming back home and just like being stuck in a computer. Because I know you feel that too. Like we talk about it sometimes, like how I like house plants, but you like gardening and you like doing stuff with your hands. And it feels like an escape from the city, right? So I feel like people that's the reason why content like hers has become so popular.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Like, there is, the kind of urbanization of humanity, which has taken place like pretty rapidly over the course of 2 centuries. Um, it's been really violent, and that's
Mhm.
left it's probably left deep psychological wounds on us. That we have, like, for instance, like 24/7 light, like artificial light. Like, there's that great book 24/7. It's by Verso. I forget the author. Um, but basically, like, that story of like remapping like our sleep cycles and
Mhm.
just the most basic elements of our, and of course obviously our food, the quality of our water, like this transformation of human beings from a largely rural group of largely rural civilization into these densely urban, hyper urbanized, uh you know electrified,
Mhm.
whatever. Like, this is quite like a shocking thing to us, I think, historically. So I think it makes sense that we do have, um, there is a kind of culture that's developed, a kind of yearning for the olden days, right? And whatever you want to call it, nostalgia or whatever. There are quite a few articles that kind of accuse Li Jiqi very stupidly, in the cheap kind of Gusano way,
Mhm.
of somehow being propaganda, because God forbid a
Yeah.
Chinese person do anything at all
Mhm.
that isn't obliquely political, that has to
So they
be.
do accuse her of being part of this like statewide propaganda campaign, and like a lot of these like sort of accusations that Westerners throw at, there's like a little bit of truth in that these videos are promoted by the Chinese government as part of its what it calls its rural revitalization plan, right? So like in the past few decades, there has been like this mass migration from the countryside to the cities. But now the Chinese government wants to modernize agriculture and diversify its economy by revitalizing the countryside, by encouraging tourism to rural areas. And it's part of this like poverty alleviation program that's targeted at the countryside. So, they've been, like, promoting this sort of, content, like Li Cheese, um, as a way of, promoting the countryside. Like, farming vacations have become really popular in recent years, with city dwellers, like, visiting the countryside to, like, kind of, like, learn crafts and, like, learn different folk customs. And the government wants to reverse this sort of brain drain by encouraging people who work in tech and other people who work in the city to move out to rural areas. Um, yeah, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's, yeah, no, but the thing is that, like, the sinister aspect of, like, I mean, I can put in a couple of one example. um like, it's this one. I closed the article, actually. Life nostalgia of the life of nostalgic content on Li Jiqi. It's an article by a grad student, Stephanie Wong. She's a grad student at Brown, PhD writer and doctoral candidate in history at Brown University. And it's low key propaganda, but who cares when you just want to watch an immaculately dressed young woman pound the shit out of purple rice she harvested in front of her house. Particularly after 2 years of growing trouble, it's nice to escape into Lee's farm to table fantasy.
Mhm.
Blah 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 blah. Um, and it's just like this idea that there's this very like juvenile and very, like, very kind of liberal belief that everything that unfolds in China is somehow immaculately staged managed by this
Mm-hmm.
puppet called the CCP, that Chinese people just kind of live at the behest of this. I mean, their favorite word is authoritarian, whatever, that they have censors and they have this and that. And, like the thought that the fact that the Chinese government would take this to that would somehow connect themselves and to like use people, or not use, I guess is the wrong verb, is that they would somehow promote this material or sometimes as be part of a larger sort of social agenda. It's just hard for people to believe that here because our governments don't talk like that. They don't like what it's usually private industry and the culture industry that kind of like moves in. Now, are there projects that kind of promote farming life? Yes, of course. Like that's not, is there a culture of like returning to the countryside in everywhere part of the world? Yes.
Yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
not
but
like I watch Iranian religions, and so it's always in the Chinese case that this kind of worldview pops up where, oh no, this is propaganda. It's low key propaganda, as if like the simple act of existing and creating content in China is always already part of some meticulously planned sort of superhuman sort of intelligence
mhm.
op, right? And like this is such like this idiotic like just moronic worldview that puts like 1.5 billion people, right? Like that's like a good fraction of humanity, right? Into this simplistic framework where everything is just a product of the government. That's it. That's all that government is. As if one government could actually do all that. And you just put it in there. And that's like, I mean, I'll put in a couple examples as we're talking about this to sort of just how like, and especially like Radio Free Asia has an episode, has a thing on her. Like there's the search results are like pure copium of Western people. Like, how dare this person become popular? And how dare this person, like this Chinese person, attain a kind of global visibility, right? Without going through our system of representation. There must be something sinister. That's the thing that like gets me mad about all of this, the reaction
Yeah,
to it.
yeah, they always paint it as something sinister, as, like, Chinese propaganda, but I think the statewide promotion of this is actually very smart, and, like, I'm a fan of the targeted poverty alleviation program that they've been doing in the countryside, so I think it's a
Yeah,
very smart
so am
idea,
I. Yeah.
but, I'm gonna read a quote. So this will tell you just, like, how much money that they've been, like, injecting into this kind of content and stuff. This is from the article that you sent me. I forget who wrote it, but this is a quote. I'll link it in the show notes. As urban centered e entrepreneurship and e consumerism gradually reach a plateau, rural digital entrepreneurship is increasingly regarded as a new propeller for sustaining China's e commerce boom and becomes more foregrounded. For example, in July 2018, ByteDance, which is the company that owns TikTok and then Douyin in China, they announced that it would pour at least 500 million RMB into supporting creators, Sanon creators, sorry, like this like farm content stuff, and soon launched a government endorsed program to encourage local internet celebrities to promote their hometowns. Similarly, Douyin's competitor Kuishu also launched a Happy Village campaign to support its more than 3.75 million users from the relatively poor areas. So, yeah, this is like a lot of money is being injected into this stuff.